In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern where there is now huge concern over a tropical cyclone that is expected to develop and move into the Gulf of Mexico, likely impacting somewhere along the US Gulf Coast and even more so likely the eastern half of that US Gulf Coast, although we can't really rule out the western half, so I want everybody to pay close attention to this storm as it might be one of the worst storms, if not the worst storms, at least that end up impacting land this hurricane season. At least that's my current prediction. I really feel bad about this storm, so we're going to talk about that today. We do expect some colder air to move into the central and eastern states. We're going to be diving into that, and overall a more stormy look across the central and eastern states than what we've seen over the past month or so. Now, before we dive into things, be sure to check out Prestige Weather, where we're going to be doing a 99-cent for your first month deal once more. It's only $5 typically, but we're doing only $1 for your first month. That's an automatic discount, so you don't even need to put a code in. We're doing a September photo contest in there where the winner receives $50, so be sure to check out all of that on your top right corner of your screen below this video and get signed up today at that killer price. We have just unveiled brand new graphics to help deliver extremely informative and efficient forecasts for your business, breaking down the snowfall forecast, timing forecast, and risk level for your specific location. Our clients have saved time and money using our services to make critical decisions. Gone are the headaches of tirelessly hunting down information across the internet. Prestige Weather is here to help you and your business. Be sure to email us at prestigeweather@gmail.com or use the Calendly link in the pinned comment down below to book a meeting with me immediately. We offer consulting calls, texts, and emails catered to your exact location of need. We will be on standby during your job or event and give you updates from start to finish. We also offer long range, medium range, and short range forecasts. We can help with rainfall and snowfall forecasts plus the timing of onset and ending, which is so important. We pride ourselves on being highly flexible, and we're always willing to deliver on your specific needs. Put a meteorologist in your pocket so you no longer have to guess what the weather will do. Let's go ahead and dive into things, and this is how the past 7 days have looked. And just as we've kind of predicted, we've continued to see this warming trend in the east. Still not as warm as our central US friends who have been really blazing this September so far, and the past 7 days especially. The northern plains and upper Midwest has been kind of the hot spot here of the United States. This area is a lot more neutral and even below average, as you can see, for some areas across the southeast. In the west, particularly the southwest here, but really across the entire US west, we do see below average temperatures, and we typically call this a negative PNA. This is what forces the warm air to move around that cold area in the west and move up into these parts. So very, very typical. Let's just take a look at the month so far, month to date. As you can see, this is through September 20th, so it's 2 days behind. I guess that's, how long very, very accurate and high definition data takes to come in. I don't know why this one is always a couple days behind, but it is. It still gives us a relatively accurate look at how the month has gone. Again, still I would say that the northern plains and the upper Midwest is the hot spot. We do see the Northwest included here. They had a very warm start to the month of September. Things have obviously cooled down since then, but that is the warmest area so far for the month of September, and we do see a continuous cooling trend in the southwest. You saw the past 7 days. This area is likely to continue cooling for a little while at least. So over the coming days, we should see blues start to pop up here across the southwest. For the south central states and a lot of the east, as we've kind of predicted, we see below average temperatures still prevailing, but a continuous warming trend is taking place, and likely these areas will be fully engulfed in the yellows and oranges over the next few days of additions here, so be on the lookout for that. I do feel confident that the southeast corridor will remain in the kind of neutral to below average temperatures through the month, so we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening with that, but especially if we see cooler air move in at some point here for the finishing of September, we should see these areas remain quite cool here on the overall anomalies for the month. For the total snowfall, we have seen an additional amount for Colorado here, as they've seen some pretty heavy snowfall over the past few days. This is obviously the past 30 days, so this is all of basically 23rd of August on to the 21st of September. We should still see some increases here for Colorado over the next couple of days. We've seen some throughout the Pacific Northwest down through the Sierra Nevada as well as the Northern Rockies here, so that has been continuously happening here. And now again, Colorado kind of beginning to show up here in the snowfall amounts for this snowfall season. Very, very interesting. Here's the total precipitation anomalies so far over the past 14 days. Above average here for the Northern Rockies, the kind of Northern Plains a bit here as well. And then even down here through the Four Corner States into the Central Plains, we have an area of above average amounts also. Then we see for areas impacted by Francine, the above average amount. This area should pick up significantly again with the upcoming tropical cyclone. And then throughout the Carolinas and even into Virginia, we see an above average amount from that other tropical system. So kind of the trend here is that all of these areas would be below average if it wasn't for the tropics. I think if we were just relying solely on lower 48 storms, you would be dealing with a very, very dry September so far. And for a lot of these areas, you are, because you didn't see the tropical cyclones. But we get these little areas where the tropical cyclones have impacted, and that is bringing the above average amounts. But without that, we would be dealing with a very, very dry look here. As we take a look here at the upcoming pattern, as we just kind of dive into things, this evening looks interesting. We see a storm system moving across kind of the Great Lakes, Midwest, and then down through the South Central states as well, where we have just overall thunderstorms and showers around. We do see some for the East Coast. It's a little more sporadic here, but overall drier out west. So we're going to put a big X there because really we're not seeing too much of anything. Your jet stream still kind of, I would say, neutral for the west here, troughing a little bit over the plains, and then still ridging over the east with a little trough here for New England. So maybe some below normal temperatures able to kind of influence these areas a bit. Not quite as cool in the west as we have been seeing. Let's just get a glance at tomorrow. This is Monday on the 23rd. And what we're seeing is a bit of a ridge over the west, actually. Trough mostly over the central states. And again, more of a ridge look in the east here. Overall, still very quiet out west. Going to be a big X there for the south central states. And really up a lot of the east here, we do see this blob of overall storminess taking place. Kind of like I mentioned yesterday, looks like we could get a warm front, cold front look from this. If that's the case, we could expect more of a warm push on the eastern end, obviously, and some cooler air still intruding to the south here. But regardless, storms prevailing throughout this pocket is the trend here. As we take a big look at Tuesday on September 24th, we see this low develop over Indiana that I just mentioned. Cold front underneath, which really gets this cold air diving southward behind that. And a warm front, which again kind of kicks off this warm push to the east. So actually things may be getting a little warmer before they cool down here in the east. Still a very strong positive P&A look out west and very, very dry. And that is helping to drive this overall pattern. Again, a lot of storminess in here due to this relatively strong low for this time of year, especially considering it's non-tropical. Again, it's just kind of a lower 48 storm, typical storm here. This is going to be a pretty big rainmaker to a lot of areas that need it. As we approach Wednesday here on September 25th, so the midweek point here coming up, what we see is we're left with some storms around the East Coast with these frontal boundaries, so more and more rainfall happening in these areas. Your jet stream is still ridging all over the west, troughing mostly over the central states with a little southeast ridge here, so some warmer air still for the southeast corridor, but the East Coast along the north should be seeing some cooler air starting to get involved. Here is that tropical cyclone already a 992 just to the north of that Yucatan Peninsula. We're dealing with very low shear, very high moisture, and overall the ceiling is kind of limitless here with this system. And we've seen storms move across the Gulf here, especially this late September into early October timeframe, develop very rapidly. Those waters are boiling hot, not literally obviously, but very, very warm even compared to normal. And really, this storm is limitless. You know, I think we do see a hurricane out of this, and I think we do see a hefty one, if you want my opinion. And I think that the Gulf Coast needs to watch this one very, very closely. I think this storm will overperform, and I would not be shocked to see a Category 3 or up. I know that's quite bold, but just given this setup now, I know you probably haven't heard that from anybody yet, but just know that probably over the coming days, that's going to be what is being discussed amongst, your local meteorologists, even the National Hurricane Center. I think that everybody's kind of starting to feel like that. They're starting to trend in that direction. And certainly I've felt quite bullish about this storm for a while, but now I'm coming out and saying it very boldly that I think this storm is going to develop very rapidly and very intensely. Regardless of that category, though, an impactful storm looks to impact the Gulf Coast, whether that's a tropical storm, category 1, category 2, whatever the category is. Expect some storm surge, some flooding, some winds. This is going to be an impactful system regardless, but it does have the potential to be an extreme storm, and that is what we're watching for closely. We are going to dive into this storm a lot more later on, so stay tuned for that. We are going to touch on it here as we're doing, but we're going to go over the spaghetti model, the intensity guidance, the National Hurricane Center, the satellite imagery. So we're going to take a deep dive into this storm towards the end, so stay tuned for that. By Thursday afternoon, I think the saving grace here with this storm is it is moving quickly. It's not just sitting over the Gulf, it is moving relatively quickly, so it would need a very rapid intensification to get very intense. But we actually do see almost that happening here. It's down to a 986, so a much stronger storm, approaching kind of that panhandle, or what I call the armpit of Florida. I've been told that it's called the Big Bend. I call it the armpit of Florida because it looks like the armpit of Africa, which is what I've always heard it referred to as. But Big Bend of Florida, kind of a hot spot here on the models. Obviously, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida all need to be on high alert. Even Georgia to the north there. For residual impacts afterwards. And even I would say Texas and Louisiana still keep watching because we've seen crazier things happen before than it trending that far west. So definitely not completely out of the water yet there. And that's really the big story. I don't see much else to discuss here on screen. I mean, we see that this storm strikes is about a 981 millibar low pressure center right there. I would say on the more western side of that Big Bend on this particular model. Again, 981 is an intense storm. We're seeing very heavy rainfall, and it's actually quite widespread in there. And this would be a pretty intense hurricane here. As we can see, this also leads towards inland impacts. This is Friday on the 27th. We get a lot of low pressure and storms happening. We get kind of a weaker low off here to the west, and then here's your tropical low. Heavy rainfall for the Appalachian Mountain Range and areas east of it as well, and then even for the Central Plains there with that secondary low. Something that I've been watching, I've kind of gone over this model run multiple times before making the video. We do get some low pressure forming behind this, and I definitely want to spend the next couple of days researching, tropical systems that have tropical systems follow them almost directly like this, and kind of research some cases where that's happened to discuss with you guys. But one thing's for certain that I've always kind of known of situations like this is they tend to kind of follow the exact path that you would see the initial one go. They kind of get sucked into the stronger storms. So I would be curious if we do see a secondary low, if unfortunately it kind of takes almost the same path, or at least a very similar one. That would be something to watch. Here on this particular model run, we see almost exactly that happen here. This is Saturday on the 28th. It's nothing like its first storm, by the way. It's just kind of a weaker low pressure system, maybe some chance for tropical development, and it moves towards Florida. We also have a lot of energy off the southeast coast after this as well. All of these things, I think, need to be watched closely. It's important to note that after this major storm rolls through, you would have seen a lot of the moisture and warmth kind of sucked out of the atmosphere and out of the water here. So you would see cooler waters kind of behind that storm and a less rich environment for tropical development. So it would be a little more challenging for this second one, if it even happens at all. It's just one model run after all. Sunday, we see it kind of cross over Florida, so a little further east than that first one, but again, taking a more similar track. And really, we give way into an interesting pattern here. This is the 1st of October here. A little bit of a ridge in the west, clearly a trough trying to develop there across the central states, and then a bit of a ridge here in the east, so pretty neutral temperatures here in the east. But this is a very strong Arctic blast we're seeing here on this particular model here, moving in right around October 1st, which we have been tracking and talking about for over a week, by the way. Then we get a low here right on that kink, I would call it, of that trough and ridge. Cold front developing underneath, warm front developing up above, and this just looks classic. We see this really strong cold air mass moving southward and eastward here. Lots of kind of storminess out ahead of all of this, which again is a very, very common sight. And we get to the end of the model run here, unfortunately, at October 2nd. Strong low over the Great Lakes, strong cold front look, and a really decent warm front out ahead. So we would see racing warm air up the east with cold air moving in right behind it on the way in. Maybe even some severe potential here for the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic if that was to take place like this. But I will say, very decent ridge out west. That's definitely going to play a factor if we see a pattern like this kind of shape up. Total precipitation here, shockingly, I mean, look at this, nothing out west almost, unless you're in the Pacific Northwest there. The east, we really see a huge surge in activity, as I've mentioned, mostly due to that hurricane, obviously, that moves through the southeast, but not only due to that, we actually see quite a bit here to the north and west of that system as well. That is probably because we see 2 or 3 storm systems move through this area. So a really, really decent pattern for the areas that really need the rainfall. Initial forecasts from this low resolution model are calling for widespread 2 to 5 inch amounts, obviously, from this hurricane, which is really the bare minimum that you expect to see from areas directly impacted, and then 5 to 10 inches within those browns, which honestly, for how strong this storm could be, is currently what I would call a low end impact as far as rainfall. And that's not to say that it wouldn't be impactful. 5 to 10 is very impactful from a single storm. But a lot of times storms that are this strong, we can get, 10 to 15, even 15 inches plus forecasted. So right now I'd say we're at the low end. There's a lot of room for this to come up. So that's what we're going to also be watching for over the coming days. The anomalies are clear here. Below average in the west, above average for most of the east, which, as you probably know if you've been watching our videos, is basically the opposite of what we've been seeing. And not only is it above average in the east, it's highly above average, especially in these blues where we're seeing 2 to 5 inches above average. And that's only over the next 15 days. So certainly a huge flip in this precipitation pattern overall. Here's the total snowfall. Also another huge flip here. I mean, we get no precipitation out west, so no surprise we don't really get snowfall out west either. So a little bit of a lull here in the snow season that is just getting going. We're zooming in. I don't really know why, because there's still not much to see. A dusting, if anything, for the Colorado Rockies there, and then maybe the Northern Cascades over the entire next 10 days, according to this European model. The temperature pattern, again, warmer in the east, a little warmer in the west, actually. We do see a cool down over the central states, which is almost the opposite of what the entire month has looked like so far. We do, however, kind of just recirculate a lot of these temperatures. This model seems a little confused right now, but we do get the cool down on October 1st, just like the European model shows, especially in the central states where this looks very intense. The European model would have it much more centered over the east, whereas this GFS model takes it straight to the south and more over the central states. Pretty different outlooks, but the thing that really stays the same here is its positive PNA look with a cooldown moving in for somebody, whether that's more the central or more the east here. We do get a cooldown to some extent, and then we get kind of a cooler pattern that sets up for a few days there, and then maybe this model towards the 15-day mark, which, by the way, is very far out, so take it with a grain of salt, but we do get back into a negative PNA pattern here with warmer air trending back in for a lot of the central and east after that first week of October. Keep in mind, we're only in like the 3rd, heading on 4th week of September, so this is a very long-range outlook here. As we take a look here at the longer range temperature outlook, ironically, 23rd through the 28th here, showing a little bit of cooler signs in the east with warmer in the west, which I'd say is pretty accurate with what we're expecting at this point. 28th through 3rd, expanding on that cooler air. And then really, when we look at the 1st through the 6th, it's the coolest point here, I think, on this model that we're really seeing. Warm out west, so positive PNA trending in. Very cold here in the central and eastern states, kind of congruent with what we've seen from all our models so far today. Here's the 5th through the 10th, very similar. And then the 10th through the 15th, we kind of get into an interesting pattern, much like what we've seen so far in September. Negative PNA with the warmer air mostly over the central states, and some colder air able to kind of linger around, especially near the immediate east coast and those entire states. I guess it's not immediate east coast, it's more just like the eastern states, the very far eastern states here, but below normal overall there for the 10th through the 15th. Here's the 15th through the 20th. We kind of expand on the cold in the east, and the warm moves a little bit further west. Here's the 20th through the 25th, a little bit of a thaw there in the east. But the 25th through the 30th of October looks very cool in the east again with warm out west. And then the 30th through the 4th of November here is looking quite cool along the east again with warmer over the central again. Very similar to September so far, like I mentioned, and this would be the Halloween time frame. Overall, the next 30 days looks like this according to this model. Warmer in the west overall, especially the central states, with some cooler temperatures near the west, kind of scattered in with the warmth. but overall cooler in the east here from the 23rd of September through the 23rd of October. As promised, here is that satellite imagery for our current storm that we are watching, and this is a concerning look. We are seeing obviously a lot of storms popping up within the immediate area of this low pressure center, which is approximately there. And we are seeing very, very tall clouds just sparking up nearby this low pressure center. So very, very strong indications that this storm is really already beginning to intensify, and we are expecting it to kind of move up into the Yucatan Peninsula and then to the north of it eventually. But we see a lot of lightning indicated by those little flashes you see on screen here, and very tall clouds developing. So this is not what you want to see. It's off to a hot start so far. And that's really why when we look at the 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook, not only do we have a high chance of development over the next 7 days, it's all the way up to an 80% chance, but we also have a 40% chance over the next 48 hours. So that chance in the kind of near term is dramatically increasing already. So definitely a pretty decent chance that we see this one popping off here over the next 2 days. And if not, pretty much immediately after is the expectation. Let's take a look at the current kind of path that we expect this one to take. Here's the European ensemble models path, and we really see a little bit less of a bullish look here, and that's consistently been what this European model has been showing, a little bit less intense. It's important to note that until today, basically, or yesterday, we saw this model really curving it back towards the western Gulf of Mexico, keeping it very weak. And overall, it is currently folded to the GFS model, which has consistently been showing it hit the eastern Gulf Coast, and now this model's on board with that. We do see some stay in the blue, which would be a pretty weak tropical storm. We see some greens in there that would be a high-end tropical storm, low-end Category 1 hurricane perhaps, and then the yellows and oranges is definitely hurricane, and we only see a few of those in there. So this model's still keeping things relatively weak. As we take a look at the GFS model, however, we see almost identical trajectory as far as the path here, but we see a couple of greens, probably as many as we saw blues on the European model, but we're seeing oranges and reds popping up in here, which would likely be major hurricane status. And I would say maybe even half of them, if not more, are orange or red here. So very strong indications from this GFS model, which so far has handled this storm much better, showing a very intense system. Another alarming thing is that, yes, half of these show it going kind of over land here, but the other half, we see it heading off the southeast coast and maybe even scraping very close to that eastern seaboard, especially like the Outer Banks of North Carolina and other areas surrounding that northern, southeast, lower mid-Atlantic area. So potential for this storm to be even more impactful than it already is expected to be is on the cards, especially from this GFS ensemble model, which again has had a much better handle on it so far. Not that that means it'll absolutely be correct, but it is a strong reason to believe that maybe it is onto the right idea here with these kind of East Coast models. So let's just continue to track that one, obviously daily. Here is the intensity guidance. We only have a couple of models here, and none of them are our European or GFS model, by the way. We only have a couple kind of hopping on board here. I'm sure tomorrow we're going to have a whole lot more. But right now, all of them show it at least hitting tropical storm status over the next 48 hours. So they do show that development within the next 48 hours. And all of them show at least a Category 1 hurricane. And 3 out of the 4, I guess that's actually 2 green ones. So 4 out of the 5 show at least Category 2 status here. And then we see 2 out of the 5, so just a little under half, showing Category 3 at least. So as you can see, the potential is already being picked up by these models and is very, very high. I do expect once we add more models here and begin to see the development, especially if it happens a little bit ahead of schedule, we will see these models getting a lot more bullish above Category 3, I would expect, especially since the timing that it has. It's moving so quick, it doesn't have a lot of time. So I think the early portion of this storm, like as in the next 2 days, is very crucial, because if it underperforms, that's going to really, the clock's going to be ticking for this storm to develop strongly. If we see it get off to a hot start, let's say, sometime tomorrow it becomes a tropical storm, at that point, tomorrow into the next day, the early next day, so at some point between like hours 24, 36, maybe to 48, I would say that'd be exceeding expectations, and that would probably bring the highest end even higher as far as what this storm is capable of being. So we're going to continue to track it. There's a lot to think about. Of course, stay up to date with our videos, but not only that, the National Hurricane Center, if you do live in the areas that could be impacted, please pay close attention. I have a bad feeling about this one. As I've been mentioning for many days, I think the ceiling is limitless, and I do think that this one is going to outperform expectations. So, with all that being said, be sure to subscribe. We do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.